I stand before the abyss of a story that chills the soul, a tale woven from the darkest threads of human depravity. Ted Bundy, a name that still lingers like a cold whisper in the wind, a man whose charm masked a predator's heart. This is not merely a recounting of events. It is a descent into the mind of a killer who terrorized America across the 1970s, leaving a trail of broken lives and unanswered questions. Prepare yourself, for what follows will unsettle even the steadiest resolve. Theodore Robert Bundy was born on November 24th, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont, under circumstances shrouded in secrecy. His early life was marked by a lie, raised by his grandparents as their son, with his mother, Eleanor Louise Cowell, posing as his sister to shield him from the stigma of illegitimacy. I recall the unease that settled over me when I first learned of this deception, a foundation of falsehood that perhaps foreshadowed the monster he would become. As a child, Bundy exhibited troubling signs, peering through neighbors' windows, collecting knives, and displaying a fascination with death. I can almost feel the chill of those early years, the seeds of darkness taking root in a boy who seemed so ordinary to the outside world. By his teenage years, he was an outwardly normal young man, studious, polite, and eager to please. Yet, beneath this facade, a darkness brewed, one that would erupt with horrifying consequences. The killings began in 1974, though the true extent may never be known. I first encountered his name in Washington state, where young women started vanishing with alarming regularity. Linda Ann Healy, a 21-year-old student, disappeared from her apartment in January 1974. Her absence noted only by an untouched breakfast and a blood-stained bed. I can still picture her room, textbooks scattered on the desk, a radio she'd never turn on again, and the eerie silence that replaced her vibrant laughter. The police were baffled, their investigations yielding little. Then came Donna Gail Manson, a 19-year-old student from Evergreen State College who vanished in March while heading to a concert on campus. Susan Elaine Rancourt disappeared in April, a 22-year-old Central Washington University student, last seen walking to her dorm after a late-night meeting. Roberta Kathleen Parks, 22, was next, taken from Oregon State University in May, her disappearance leaving her family in anguish, each a promising life snuffed out, their bodies discarded in remote forests of the Pacific Northwest, hidden among the towering pines and damp undergrowth. I felt a shiver as I read the reports, imagining the terror they endured in their final moments, their screams swallowed by the wilderness. Bundy's method was as calculated as it was ruthless. He targeted women with long, dark hair parted in the middle, a chilling pattern that mirrored the appearance of a woman from his past. Some say it was a former girlfriend who rejected him. Others speculate it was his mother, whose deception had scarred him. I can picture the scene. A young woman, her compassion triggered, stepping into his trap, unaware that his smile concealed a predator's intent. He often approached them under the guise of injury or distress, sometimes with a cast on his arm, sometimes limping with a cane, asking for help with his car or to carry books to his apartment. Once ensnared, he would bludgeon them with a crowbar, strangle them, or both, then transport their bodies to secluded locations. The depravity deepened. Some victims were revisited, their corpses subjected to necrophilic acts, their hair washed, and makeup reapplied as if they were dolls in a grotesque play. I can barely fathom the horror of those moments, the violation of their humanity even after death, a detail that still haunts me when I dwell on it. The authorities struggled to connect the dots. I remember the frustration in news reports, the public's growing fear as the disappearances spread to Oregon, Utah, and Colorado. Bundy's mobility, driving a tan Volkswagen Beetle, allowed him to evade capture, his unassuming appearance blending seamlessly into society. He was a chameleon, slipping into roles that disarmed suspicion, a law student at the University of Utah, a volunteer at a crisis hotline, even a campaign worker for the Republican Party. I find myself wondering how many people crossed his path, unaware of the danger lurking behind his hazel eyes and disarming smile. In 1975, a traffic stop in Granger, Utah, finally brought him under scrutiny. A search of his car revealed a chilling inventory: handcuffs, a ski mask, a crowbar, duct tape, and a bag of women's clothing, tools of his trade. Yet even then, the full scope of his crimes remained hidden. I felt a cold dread as I learned he was released on bail, only to strike again, his compulsion to kill outweighing any fear of capture. His first arrest came after a failed abduction attempt. Carol DeRonch, a young woman from Murray, Utah, narrowly escaped his grasp in November 1974. I can envision her terror as Bundy, posing as a police officer, lured her to his car under the pretense of investigating a break-in. She felt something was off, the smell of alcohol on his breath, the way his hands trembled, but it was too late. He tried to handcuff her, but in the struggle she broke free, running into the night as he chased her with a crowbar. Her testimony would later become a cornerstone of his prosecution, a rare survivor's voice amidst a sea of silenced lives. I admire her courage, the strength it took to face him in court, knowing how close she came to being another name on his list. Bundy's escape from custody in 1977 marked a turning point. I can still hear the disbelief in the voices of those reporting his breakout from a Colorado jail, where he had been held for a kidnapping charge related to DeRonch's case. He had been extradited to Colorado for the murder of Corinne Campbell, a 23-year-old nurse who disappeared from a ski resort in Snowmass in January 1975. While in custody, Bundy escaped twice. First in June 1977 by jumping out of a courthouse window during a recess, only to be recaptured 6 days later, and then again in December, when he sawed through the ceiling of his cell in Glenwood Springs and fled into the snowy night. I can almost see him, a shadow in the blizzard, his breath fogging in the freezing air as he made his way to freedom and to more bloodshed. He fled to Florida, reinventing himself as Chris Hagen and renting a room near Florida State University. The bloodshed resumed with a vengeance. On January 15th, 1978, he entered the Chi Omega sorority house in the dead of night. I visualize the scene: students asleep, unaware of the shadow creeping through the halls, the creak of the wooden floorboards under his weight. He attacked 4 women in a matter of minutes, bludgeoning Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy to death with a log from the fireplace, leaving the others, Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner, gravely injured. The brutality was staggering. Levy's body bore bite marks, a signature of his sadistic nature, later used as forensic evidence to tie him to the crime. I can't shake the image of that sorority house, once a place of laughter and sisterhood, now a scene of unimaginable horror, its walls stained with the echoes of screams. Just hours after the Chi Omega attack, Bundy struck again, breaking into the apartment of Cheryl Thomas, a dance student just blocks away. I imagine her sleeping, unaware of the danger as he crept through her window, the moonlight casting his shadow on the wall. He beat her savagely, but she survived, though her injuries left her with permanent hearing loss and the end of her dancing career. The speed of his violence, the sheer audacity to kill again so soon, sends a chill down my spine. I wonder how he could move through the world so brazenly, his humanity stripped away, leaving only a hollow shell driven by bloodlust. Days later, on February 9th, 1978, Bundy abducted 12-year-old Kimberly Leach from her school in Lake City, Florida. I pause, the weight of her youth pressing down, the youngest of his known victims. She was last seen being led away from her school by a man matching Bundy's description, her classmates unaware of the danger. Her body was found months later, discarded in a pigsty under a rusted shed, her innocence shattered in the most horrific way. I can still hear the anguish in her parents' voices during news broadcasts, their pleas for her safe return turning to grief as the truth unfolded. The nation recoiled, and the manhunt intensified. I followed the news as police closed in, finally arresting him on February 15th, 1978, after a traffic stop in Pensacola revealed his identity through a stolen license plate. The trials that followed were a spectacle, broadcast live to a nation hungry for justice. I watched, transfixed, as Bundy represented himself, his legal knowledge a twisted extension of his intellect. He was eerily calm, even charming, cross-examining witnesses with a smile, as if this were a game he could win. In the Chi Omega case, he was convicted in July 1979, the evidence overwhelming. Bite marks matched to his teeth, hair samples from his car, and eyewitness accounts from survivors. The Leach trial in February 1980 sealed his fate, with a second death sentence pronounced. Yet, even in court, he toyed with the system, delaying execution with appeals and even marrying a former girlfriend, Carol Ann Boone, during the trial. A union that produced a daughter, a chilling reminder of his ability to manipulate even in captivity. I felt a mix of rage and fascination as he confessed to 30 murders in the days leading up to his execution, though some estimate the toll could reach 100 or more. Bundy's final days were spent on Florida's death row at Rayford Prison, where I learned he engaged in manipulative interviews, offering confessions to prolong his life and gain attention. He spoke to investigators about his crimes, describing the murders in the third person as if to distance himself. But the details were too vivid, too personal. I can hear his voice in those recordings, calm and detached, as he recounted luring women to their deaths, his lack of remorse chilling me to the core. On January 24th, 1989, at 7:16 a.m., he was executed in the electric chair, known as Old Sparky. I recall the silence that followed, the world exhaling as justice was served, or so it seemed. Witnesses described his last moments, his body convulsing, his eyes wide with fear, a stark end to a life of evil. Outside the prison, crowds gathered, some cheering, others holding signs that read, "Burn Bundy, burn." I can still feel the weight of that moment, the finality of his death, overshadowed by the lingering pain of his victims' families. Yet, the questions linger. How many more victims remain unknown? What drove him to such depths? I have read theories, Some point to his childhood, the rejection by his mother, the discovery of his illegitimacy, shattering his sense of self. Others suggest a neurological defect, a brain wired for violence, incapable of empathy. Psychologists labeled him a psychopath, a narcissist, a man who craved control above all else. I find myself pondering the nature of evil, wondering if Bundy was born a monster or made one by the circumstances of his life. His own words offer little clarity. In one interview, he blamed pornography for his urges, a claim I find hollow, a deflection from the darkness within. The legacy of Ted Bundy is a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide behind a human face. I am left to wonder if his charm was a weapon, a mask for a mind that reveled in control and destruction. His story does not end with his death. It lives on, a cautionary tale etched into the psyche of a nation. Bundy's crimes inspired books, documentaries, and films, each attempting to unravel the enigma of his mind. I think of the families left behind, the mothers who buried their daughters, the siblings who grew up with an empty chair at the table. Their pain endures, a silent testament to the cost of his reign of terror. As I close this narrative, I ask you, does the shadow of Ted Bundy still cast its pall over the places he once roamed? I can almost hear the whispers in the forests of Washington, the echoes of screams in the sorority houses of Florida, the unanswered cries of a little girl in Lake City. His Volkswagen Beetle, now a relic in a crime museum, seems to hold the ghosts of those he took. Reflect on this, if you dare. What would you do if you crossed paths with a man like Bundy, his smile hiding a nightmare? The answer, I fear, is as elusive as the man himself.